Hi everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made using the February My Creative Scrapbook limited edition kit. I had some questions about backing a cut file, so I thought I would show you how I go about backing my cut files for my Creative Scrapbook layouts. I'm using this Love You More cut file, and this is available to all my Creative Scrapbook kit subscribers. I cut the cut file out twice. Once I cut it out the regular way, and then the second time I cut it out without the inner cuts so that the piece would be solid. In order to back the cut file, I use the cut file with the inner cuts, and I cut out letters and I traced around the inside of the cut file, and then I cut out the letters a tiny bit larger, and then I glued them down in their correct spot. Then I cut that solid piece without the inner cuts into two pieces. I normally don't do that, but because there are the hearts going down the middle and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with the hearts yet, I decided I wouldn't back the hearts. I love to stitch on my cut files, so after I had glued the backing down and let the glue dry, I used this tool. This is an Amy Tangerine tool meant for paper piercing, and I'm punching holes right along the inner edge of the cut file. I don't show too much footage of this because my head always gets in the way. I do think it's a good idea to be right above the cut file when you're punching the holes so you could see exactly what you're doing. I make the holes approximately 3/16 of an inch apart from each other, and I do that now just kind of automatically because I've been doing it for so long, but of course you can use a ruler if you like. These are the hearts from that second solid version of the cut file that I cut off of the rest of the backing before. I'm going to place my photo in the center heart. For the other two hearts, I'm layering up these scalloped pieces. I fussy cut all of these scallops out of a piece of pattern paper that we got in this month's kit, and now I'm layering those scallops on top of each other. I just put some adhesive on the heart, and then I position those scalloped pieces where I want them, and then I continue layering. I start at the bottom and work my way up to the top of the heart. A lot of times I will draw some straight lines across whatever shape I am putting strips of paper on in this manner, but this time I did not, so I'm trying to be very careful that those strips of paper are straight so that they won't look wonky when I'm done layering them. A few times I did place the strips down crooked, and I was just able to peel the strips back up again because I'm using a repositionable adhesive. And I checked the heart behind the cut file to see if I was done layering the paper, but I needed one more strip of paper going across the top. And I was a little surprised at how much paper was necessary to cover these two little hearts, but it was because I was putting the scallops very close to each other. And I really like the amount of texture that that gave to the hearts. I think it's just a nice little touch that make the hearts a little bit more interesting. Now I'm trimming off some excess paper. Some of the strips that were trimmed off, if they were a little bit longer, were used to make the second heart. Now I'm using some gel glue, and I'm going to attach the layered heart down to the cut file. I like to use gel glue to back my cut file. I like the way it dries clear. The ATG adhesive is a little hard to use on these very thin areas of the cut file, but I feel like the gel glue does the trick. And then after I had the first heart glued into place, I put the cut file aside and I began working on the second heart. I have completed the stitching. I use a simple backstitch and 6 strands of white embroidery thread. I have a few ends of thread that I have to kind of get out of the way, and so I'm using a little bit of Scotch tape and I'm taping those ends down. The reason that I cut out that second solid version of the cut file is because it makes the whole cut file much sturdier. It allows me to punch holes and do the stitching on the cut file without there being any ripped paper. I used to have some trouble with ripping through the edge of the paper before I started adding this backing. This has really made a big difference in being able to quickly stitch a cut file. So now I'm going to add my photo. Since the cut file says love you more, and I had a photo of all 3 of my dogs together on the couch where they're not supposed to be because my husband doesn't like the dogs on the couch, I thought that I would include that photo. It fit perfectly in that center heart. I traced around the outside of the cut file, and then I cut my photo down into a heart shape. I kept trialing it to make sure that it was the right size, kept trimming it until it was the correct size. And then even though I don't really like to use a lot of wet glue on my photos, when I'm backing a cut file, I will use some wet glue. I applied some gel glue sparingly to the underside of the cut file where the heart is. Now my cut file is complete. Next, I'm going to start working on the background of my layout. I used an EK Success border punch, and I cut 4 strips of this beautiful lace border. I want to make kind of a frame around the outside of the pattern paper that I'm going to use. I'm using my ruler and the lines on this mat to create 45-degree angles on each of the corners. I draw a line with my pencil, and then I use my ruler to draw a straighter line, and then I use my scissors and I cut the angle. Now I've cut the majority of the corners. I'm just going to cut that last strip, and then I place them all together on this beautiful piece of pattern paper that was in the kit this month. I just love that marbled look in the background, and I love the purple, blue, and pink color scheme. I glued all of the strips down, and they fit together well. They're not absolutely perfect, but I don't think that it made a big difference. I still think that it looks like a frame. I didn't put a ton of adhesive on the strips because there are holes in them, so I just put little touches of adhesive so there would be no adhesive that was behind the open parts of those strips. For some reason, I never cut out and put the piece of the cut file on top of the R. There's that little part of the R that is an inner cut, so I finally remembered to cut that piece out and glue the part of the cut file on top. And I am going to have to stitch around that part of the cut file. The stitching adds a little bit of dimension to the back of the cut file. Since I don't have any stitching on the heart that has my photo, that part of the cut file is sagging just a tiny bit. So I cut out some hearts, I layered them on top of each other, and I'm attaching those behind the middle heart that has my photo. I wanted to point out that I did stitch around the inside of the 2 hearts that have the layered scalloped papers on them. I was going to leave them the way they were, but then I finally decided they didn't match with the rest of the cut file, so I decided that I would punch some holes and do a little bit of stitching, and I'm glad. I think that gives the whole cut file a finished look. I wanted to add some strips of pattern paper around the outside of that lace frame that I made earlier with my punch. So I cut some very thin strips of one of the pattern papers. I inked the edges with some distress ink in Victorian velvet. I'm cutting those tiny corners on 45-degree angles. I am placing them just a tiny bit in from the edge of the white paper. These strips of paper are very thin, but I think they just finish off the edge of that punched border. I used ATG adhesive and I attached those strips down. Then I cut the 45-degree angle on these strips with my scissor by sight. I wasn't worried about measuring because it's such a tiny strip of paper. I knew that the angle, if it was off, it wouldn't make a big difference. It became clear that the layered paper that I added behind the center heart was not giving the photo enough dimension. So I took this piece of cardstock waste, what's left over after you use all the cardstock pieces, and I cut out an approximate shape of a heart. I put that behind the photo. This is not too thick, but it was a little bit better at giving me the dimension that I needed to pop up that photo and allow it to sit flat on the page. I wanted to add a detail around the outside of the photo. It just had kind of an unfinished look, especially since there is stitching on the other 2 hearts. So I decided I would put a string of pearls. Sorry about my head being in the camera, but I put down some glossy accents, which is a great adhesive for things like pearls, and I attached a strand of 3mm pearls all around the photo. Now I'm adding some of these beautiful dimensional flowers that we got in this month's kit, and I am putting at least 1 pink and 1 white flower in each of the 3 clusters. I also have a few embellishments that I'm adding. I added some swans, however, I don't end up leaving the swans on the layout. I added an ephemera piece to the heart at the top of the page, and then I also added some clusters of flowers. These were from the ephemera pack. I'm inking the edges once again with some Victorian velvet, probably whatever Distress Oxide I already had on my dauber. There was a little sentiment that said Happy Heart Day, but I cut off the day and just put the Happy Heart portion on that heart at the top of the page. I put a banner across the heart at the bottom of the page, and I just love those banners. There were 2 of them in this month's kit, and there was also a pattern paper covered with those images. I just love them. It's a banner made up of a lot of different color hearts. I'm using some heavy matte gel. This is Golden brand, and I'm attaching down the dimensional flowers. I use the gel medium because it is a very strong adhesive. It takes a little bit longer to dry than regular glue, but it will hold down slightly larger things like these dimensional flowers. I attach down that banner, and I make sure I have it in just the right place. I have a little banner that says Sweet Love, and I place that at the bottom of the U. And now I'm using some embossed leaves to add a little bit of sparkle to the layout. To make the leaves, I used some white cardstock. I used an Altenew die set called Just Leaves, and then I used a Ranger embossing powder, and it's called Gold Tinsel. And I always put at least 2 layers of embossing powder on anything that I emboss. I just think that it looks so much better after the second coat. I have flown through that container of gold tinsel embossing powder. I have used it so much recently that I think I might actually use up an entire embossing powder. I don't think I have used up an entire container of embossing powder before. Once I had all of the leaves where I wanted them, I used gel glue. I put a little bit of glue on the base of each of the stems, and I tucked them back in behind the flowers. There are some touches of gold foiling on the pattern papers that were in this month's kit, so I thought that this gold embossing powder would go along with it. I cut out some more die cuts to layer on top of the gold leaves. I'm just going to leave these white. I liked the idea of adding a small, delicate die cut in with the gold leaves. I'm using some dies that I don't know the manufacturer of. These look like little buds or berries, and I think they give kind of the same effect as putting baby's breath into a bouquet of flowers. I added a couple of pearls, 2 pearls in each corner. I used white pearls, and they overlap that small strip of pattern paper. I wanted to add some pearls to that banner. I like the idea of drawing some attention to that banner because I love it so much. So I'm using some different colored pearls. I have white pearls and blue pearls and pink pearls. I'm alternating the colors, and I used the smallest size pearl that I had. Now I'm using some Opal glitter medium. I got this at Hobby Lobby a while back, and I'm brushing that onto all of the flowers to give them a little bit of extra glitter and shine. I love adding pearls to the flowers, so I'm using some different size pearls, but I'm keeping the pearls the same color as the flower that I add them to. So I have some pink pearls on the pink flowers, and then I use some white pearls on the white flowers. And again, I'm using glossy accents because I think that the glossy accents really helps those pearls to stay put for the long run. My head was in too much of the footage to include it all, but I added pearls to all the flowers, and now I'm using some Finnabair gold paint. The color is Ancient Coin, and I'm adding a little bit of gold paint to 2 of the flowers. I just thought it helped to make those flowers go along with the rest of the layout. I'm being very, very careful to get just the center of the flower and not get the gold paint anywhere else on the layout. And that is the final touch, and here are some close-ups. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or if you would like to say hello, please feel free to leave a comment. take a look in the description box for the link to the My Creative Scrapbook website where you can view all of the current kits and purchase a subscription if you are interested. I hope you have a fantastic day and I hope to see you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.